When I say Lee Luke, when I rep Baton Rouge and all my niggas.
My hood, I used to go change clothes, 2 or 3 times. But I did those things because I used to see Lee Lucas do those things. He used to...
I died before I read Lee Lucas raised me.
So my younger asked me, who is Lee Lucas? I say he's a street legend.
Yo, what it is, people, we is back. Never down, keep it G News. And there y'all, we talking about a street legend, man. Not a Baltimore street legend. I'm going to get more into some Baltimore street legends a little bit later on in the channel, man. Stay tuned for that. But today we're in Louisiana, man, to talk about a guy by the name of Lee Lucas. Now, sure a lot of people heard Lee Lucas' name. I've been hearing his name probably since I was a kid, coming from Boosie. Kevin Gates keep his name going. Big Head the Dome Doctor, he used to be with Trill. One of Boosie old homeboys keep his name going. But how many people actually know what Lee Lucas was charged with? I didn't. And I found it intriguing because I want to know how many people know him. You always hear about this guy's name, And we got that in our neighborhood. A lot of neighborhoods got guys that's almost like revered, Majority of the times they get took off the streets at a very early age. They'll have a nice run. And it's beautiful. It's something to witness. I'm trying to tell you. You'll sit back and you'll look at these guys and be like, yo, that's what I want to be when I get older. Just from lack of influence. We don't have, in our community a lot of times, we don't have those role models. So a lot of times we look to the streets. Whether it's a good or bad thing, nowadays I think it's more bad than it is good. But back then in those times, in the 90s and things like that, in the 80s, the drug dealers we used to look out for you. Some of them can be almost like father figures. And I think that's what Lee Lucas was to Louisiana. And a lot of people felt like he was done wrong in Louisiana. Kevin Gates think he was done wrong. A lot of people didn't like how his trial went down. So in this video, we're going to explain the trial. It's going to be 2 segments. Because it's 2 parts of this trial. Or 2 parts of the witness testimony that you got to pay attention to in this trial. Because I don't know, yo. I'm kind of stuck on, did he get a fair shake? Or did the prosecutors play within the lines? Because every now and then they would jump outside the lines. But when you hear Big Head talk about it, he believes that Lee Lucas was one of the first in Baton Rouge to go to prison because of influence.
See, like Lee Lucas fell victim of influence. Just like how they tried to trap Boo up. Influence. How they tried to trap Mr. up. Influence. See, people got to be careful with their influence because the court system will try to trap you up from your influence. And I learned that from Lee, and Lee was a street dude. He wasn't, we was getting into the rap thing. He was going to be the first one to really put me in the studio and give me a shot. You heard me? But he got caught up in that. But it was influence, bro. Like, the dude was a good dude. Like, he was not a Robin Hood or nothing like that, because, like, when you come up in Southside Baton Rouge, you either soft or hard. He had the soft look, but he was hard. So he dealt with that, but he kept it real. He struggled. He wasn't from, like, I don't know if he was, like, struggling, because when I met him, he was already in the game and winning, but he looked out for people like me with nothing. He didn't look over me. He didn't need me. It was nothing I could do to help him, but he still, looked out for me and people like me. So with that being said, I always be loyal and grateful to somebody like that. And when he got caught up, like I say, to my knowledge, it was all influence. Like, some people like you that much and love you that much, admire you that much, want to be you that much, or whatever, want to be down or whatever, they will actually do harmful things to people thinking that will gain points with you. And he was the first person I ever knew that got caught up like that, and he's still in jail right now. So if somebody's saying free him, I understand, because that's the first person I know fell victim to influence that the judge and the DA actually threw the book at because of your influence. You couldn't prove he did nothing or nothing like that. Only thing you could prove is he had a lot of influence on a lot of people. The whole South loved him. People from the Park loved him. Easy Town, everybody close to the South, people in Texas, all that had love for this dude. And he was just a street dude, a good
Had
guy.
to take the glasses off, y'all. And I'm going to make sure I put every single one of these interviews in the description. But believe it or not, y'all, it was a time when the drug dealers actually used to make sure the block was straight. You know, nobody really liked drug dealers on their block, but for the older folks that knew these guys, they felt safe. They knew as long as they was outside, they didn't have to worry about too much. You know, they'd bring their bags in the house. If, you know, we got an older lady on the block and her husband might have passed, you know, the guys on the block could help her with her bags, you know, anything she needed. Even if she needed something moved in the house. And that's how the neighborhood was functioning. And I think that's what Lee Lucas brought into that neighborhood. And when you hear Big Head speak about Lee Lucas, he mentioned him with the names of Boosie. Because a lot of people during that time, well, when Boosie was arrested, felt like Boosie was done wrong. You know, they tried to pin all these murders on him. And they tried to use evidence that was lyrics. And they didn't really have too much to go on. And it was almost like they was trying to railroad Boosie. They had the man on death row for a case that really wasn't strong. Like, how often do you see that? I don't think you do. You don't normally see too many people come off of death row. Normally, if they trying to sentence somebody to death, they have a rock solid case. But not Louisiana. Louisiana is one of them states that'll hang you. Almost, not literally, but you know what I'm saying. Look what they doing to C Murder. C Murder done had witness recant statements. They done had people say they was coerced by the detectives. And they still holding this man in prison. And for people that think that detectives won't make you plead guilty to crimes that you didn't commit, you're a goddamn lie. I've seen it in my own case. I've seen a guy plead guilty to a crime that he didn't commit because homicide made him feel like it was in his best interest. And these guys will do it, you know, if you're not mentally strong enough. But Big Head thinks that Lee Lucas went down because of influence. And I told y'all on numerous occasions, influence is a real thing. We see what's going on with Honeycomb Brazy in Alabama. Alabama is harassing Honeycomb Brazy because of influence. Now, I ain't saying he the sharpest knife in the drawer. I ain't saying that at all. You understand? I know he made some mistakes. But at the end of the day, I told y'all how I felt about that. You know, if the state of Alabama really cared about Honeycomb Brazy, they'd have let Honeycomb Brazy do parole and probation elsewhere. But that's not what it is. You know, they scared of your influence, so instead of releasing your influence to another state, another city, letting them handle it, they keep you there. Because you're not going to have that influence wherever you go. So it really don't make sense to me, other than the fact that they want you in prison. But the question in this video was, did Lee Lucas get a fair trial? Evidence at trial revealed the following. On December 26, 1996, at approximately 2 a.m., the victim, Eric Howard, was shot in the chest as he was getting into his vehicle, a black Lexus, at the Howard Johnson Hotel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The victim had driven to the hotel with Derek Sleepy Collins and Clayton Olin to pick up Tatiana Hayes. The record established that the vehicle of the person who had shot Howard was next to the victim's vehicle during the attack, and the assailant escaped from the scene driving off in a Lexus automobile. Collins, Olin, and Hayes, while frantic and excited, drove the victim to the emergency room for treatment. Olin testified that while in transit to the hospital, Hayes, referring to the defendant, stated he was out here bad for doing it, which Olin understood to mean that the defendant had no reason for shooting the victim. In her testimony, Hayes claimed, however, that it was Collins who stated, "Man, Lee out here bad," and not her. While in critical condition at the emergency room and shortly before undergoing surgery, the victim told 2 police officers that the defendant had shot him and that the defendant drove a green Lexus. At trial, Hayes claimed she named the defendant as the perpetrator in the pretrial statements because Detective Bureau had told her the defendant was the perpetrator. However, Detective Bureau testified that he never instructed Hayes concerning what to say, never told her to name the defendant as the shooter, and had no idea who the shooter was before speaking to Hayes. Hayes also claimed that in response to questioning by the mother of the victim at the hospital as to who shot her son, she stated, "They said Lee Lucas." The testimony of the mother of the victim was, however, that when Haynes named the defendant as her son's assailant, she gave no indication that she was speaking from anything other than first-hand knowledge. The victim mother stated that Haynes in no way suggested that she had not seen the shooter and in no way suggested that she did not know the identity of the shooter. Haynes' statement to her at the hospital did not lead the victim's mother to believe that Haynes had been relying on information given to her from a police officer. At trial, Haynes also testified that there was maybe a possibility that the perpetrator had his hair in braids. At the time of his arrest, the defendant's hair was in braids or plaits, and he admitted his hair was in plaits on December 26, 1996. Additionally, Haynes testified that the perpetrator was in a Lexus automobile. She claimed not to remember the color of the Lexus, subsequently contending only to know that the vehicle was a Lexus because of what she heard on the street. But she was able to describe the shooter's vehicle as being one just like the victim's, a Lexus. A bullet recovered from the victim's body. Charles R. Watson, an expert in ballistics examination, testified that the bullet that killed the victim had been discharged from a firearm with polygonal rifling. Based on the established literature, the only firearm Watson could identify as having polygonal rifling was Glock firearms. The defendant was arrested in Chicago, Illinois on January 16, 1997. Although he claimed to have been in Chicago visiting a sick relative, the return date on his airplane ticket was January 15, 1997. Additionally, the airline ticket were in the name of Bruce Hills. The defendant had Bruce Hills' driver's license on his person at the time of his arrest. According to the defendant, Hills purchased the tickets for him because the defendant had no form of identification. Hills testified that he purchased the ticket for the defendant. When asked why the defendant had his driver's license on person, Hills indicated that he had forgotten to get it back from the defendant. Defendant claimed that he did not presently own the green Lexus he referred to in the July 13, 1997 taped statement, but admitted that he had access to his own green Lexus. However, Detective Vick, who was present at the statement, testified that the defendant had claimed ownership of the green Lexus he referred to on the tape. During cross-examination, the defendant accused the prosecutor of attempting to pressure him into accepting a 40-year sentence for robbing his uncle, Willie Carter. According to the defendant, the robbery stemmed from an attempt by Carter, who while under the influence of drugs, tried to give money to the defendant. The defendant conceded, however, that his uncle had summoned the police and had filed charges over the matter. When the state called Carter on rebuttal at trial, he claimed that he could not recall whether he advised police that the defendant had a weapon when he spoke to police on December 24, 1996. When shown a copy of the report, Carter stated that he had falsely advised police that the defendant had a Glock 9mm pistol and claimed not to recall stating that the defendant had a green Lexus. The defendant's alibi for his whereabouts was that he had gone to see a girlfriend in Lafayette on December 24, 1996, returned to his mother house in Baton Rouge at approximately 8:15 a.m. on December 25, 1996, and remained there until the next morning. He stated that he remained at his mother's house, except when he delivered gifts to family members between approximately 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. on December 25, 1996. The prosecutors pointed out that the incident involving the defendant's uncle, Willie Carter, occurred on December 24, 1996, which is when the defendant claimed to have been in Lafayette. In response, the defendant explained that the incident with his uncle occurred prior to his departure for Lafayette in the early morning hours of December 24, 1996. The defendant denied having either a 9mm Glock or a green Lexus at the time of the incident with his uncle. The defendant also denied having killed the victim, Eric Howard. Eula Jackson, defendant's mother, testified that the defendant was asleep in her daughter's room at her house at the time of the murder. Jackson stated that she owned a 1999 Suburban in the town car. Jackson was shown State's Exhibit 17 and August 7, 1997 photograph of a woman exiting a red Cadillac parked to a green Lexus, which she identified as depicting her getting out of a Cadillac parked next to her Lexus. When asked why the defendant drove her Lexus, she answered, "All the time. He drives. He drives all my cars." Renita Booker, the defendant's sister, testified that the defendant was supposedly asleep in her bed at the time of the murder. Tommy LaFave, a salesman with Beverly Hills Motor Cars, testified that in July of 1997, the defendant brought a blue Lexus which did not need a paint job. LaFave stated that the defendant had put the vehicle title in the name of his mother, Eula Jackson. LaFave recalled that the defendant brought the vehicle back a couple weeks later to show off his new green paint. He conceded, however, that he had not checked the VIN on the green Lexus and could not be certain it was the same as the blue Lexus. The jury in the instant case voted unanimously to convict the defendant of second-degree murder. The verdict reflects the jury's acceptance of testimony of the state witness and rejection to the testimony of the defendant and his witnesses. As the tier of facts, the jury was free to accept or reject in whole or in part the testimony of any witness, where there is conflicting testimony about factual matters, the resolution of which depends upon the determination of the credibility of the witness. So in that clip, you basically got the evidence. But it gets deeper. And in this next clip I'm going to play for y'all, I want y'all to pay real close attention on what's going on and what's transpired. But you see, and for the most part, they had a few people coming to court and testifying. They had gunshot analysts willing to testify. They had the other people that was in the car willing to testify, but it's conflicting reports. A lot of these people gave two different statements. They give statements to the detectives and say one thing, and then once they get on stand, they say another thing. And a lot of times, that's rules for charges to be thrown out. You know, that's rules to get a not guilty when you go to trial, because they supposed to find you guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, I don't know if Lee Lucas did these things or not. Like I say, y'all know I got a problem with the justice system. I'm just doing this video to show y'all what happened to Lee Lucas, and I want y'all opinion on, do y'all think the prosecutors played by the rules? You know, and my condolences to everybody that was involved and affected throughout this whole situation. But this next clip, you're going to hear about how Lee Lucas actually was found guilty and the testimony that they used. Was it fair? Prior to trial, the state filed a motion of limine seeking a ruling on the admissibility of certain statements from the victims as dying declarations. At the hearing on the motion, the state introduced into evidence the victim's death certificate, his autopsy report, and his medical records. These documents reflected that the victim died on January 15, 1997, from sepsis and pneumonia resulting from a gunshot wound to his left chest, which injured 3 of his ribs and his liver. The state also presented testimony from Dr. John Jones, the victim's treating physician, when he arrived at Baton Rouge General Hospital emergency room at 2:30 a.m. on December 26, 1996. Upon arrival, the victim was unresponsive, sweating profusely, and in severe distress. He had suffered a gunshot wound through his lower chest, which the doctor characterized as seriously critical injury. He had a pulse, but he was not breathing very well on his own. He was resuscitated, and his condition improved dramatically, i.e. his blood pressure and pulse stabilized, and he was scheduled for surgery. He was advised that a chest tube would have to be inserted into his chest wall and drained out accumulated blood and air, and that he was going to have surgery. He went to the operating room at 3:52 a.m. During surgery, he flatlined, i.e. his heart stopped beating, but he was resuscitated again. The state also presented testimony from Baton Rouge City Police Officer Carl Dunn. Officer Dunn was working extra duty detail at the Baton Rouge General when the victim arrived. Upon arrival, the victim had blood all over him. He was bleeding, unconscious, and not moving. Officer Dunn helped the victim into a wheelchair and took him to the trauma room. Thereafter, Officer Dunn accompanied Detective Bureau when he questioned the victim concerning his knowledge of who shot him. The questioning occurred prior to the victim's surgery. The victim, speaking through an oxygen mask, answered that Lee Lucas had shot him. The victim was serious as he spoke and struggled to speak. Detective Bureau asked the victim if he was sure. The victim stated yes, shaking his head. As the police officer turned to leave the victim caught their attention by stating, "Hey." Detective Bureau asked the victim if he had anything else to say. The victim responded, "Yeah, he drives a green Lexus." Baton Rouge City Police Sergeant Keith Bureau also testified at the hearing. He corroborated Officer Dunn's testimony concerning the victim's statement. He stated that the victim was in pain as he spoke, could not speak in a normal tone, and spoke softly. He added that the victim was aware he was going into surgery at the time he made his statement because he, Sergeant Bureau, had told him that the victim was seriously injured and that he was going to be going to surgery. Sergeant Bureau was unable to further question the victim during the period between the completion of his surgery and his death because the victim was unconscious on those instances when Sergeant Bureau called him again. Finding that the victim was aware of his condition and had a sense of impending death under such a serious injury, the trial court held the victim's statement concerning the identity of the assailant and the vehicle he drove to be admissible as dying declarations. The defendant objected to the court ruling, assigned error and filed for supervisory review of the ruling in both this court and the Louisiana Supreme Court. However, the defendant writ application was denied. Now, when you hear these people explain Eric Howard injuries, sound like to me he was in pretty bad shape before surgery, and it looked like he died during surgery, which is tragic, and I feel sorry that any family have to endure something like this. But when you listen to how they describe his injuries, like I said, he was in bad shape. But somehow, some way, they was able to get a confession out of him. And for the people that know how court proceedings are supposed to work, you're always supposed to be able to face your accuser. But what the prosecutors and the judge allowed in this case was to allow his statements to be used as a dying declaration. Almost like, if a person on their deathbed and they say, look, I want you to give this to this person and that to this person. Now, was he in his right state of mind? Who knows? You feel me? I can't be the judge of that. But I want to know how y'all feel about the evidence that was presented as trial. Do y'all think that those statements should have even been able to be used? Being as though he couldn't be cross-examined. You understand what I'm saying? But when you hear the detectives discuss it and they break down how it all played out, it sounds like that he had a sound mind and knew exactly what he was doing when he gave his testimony, when he said Lee Lucas shot me, when he said he was in the green Lexus. I want to know how y'all feel about this in the comments, man. How do y'all feel about Lee Lucas? Should Lee Lucas be revered in Baton Rouge, from the outside looking in, because to the state of Louisiana, he a murderer. And what murderer should be revered? You understand what I'm saying? That's what they want you to believe, but just because a person make a mistake, that don't make him a bad person. We all make mistakes, some of them greater than others, but it's about what you do after that mistake. How can you make amends for what you did in the past? That matters. But a lot of times, and in Lucas' case especially, he ain't getting that chance, so we not going to get a chance to see what he can do, how much he have grown over these years because they got him stuck in prison. But I want to know how y'all feel about this in the comments. Did he get a fair trial? Should Lee Lucas be in prison right now? Or should they do a retrial, Let me know in the comments, man. It's another day of Keep It G News.
Nigga can't do what I do, y'all niggas can't copy me. Let's keep shit G. Let's keep shit G. Let's keep the shit G. Let's keep shit G. Let's keep shit G.